folks a second.
Yeah.
We've been planning this for a long time.
Well, it's a lot of work to put on an event like this, but it's beautiful to do it.
Yes, it's really fun. It's great we had so many nonprofits together at the same time.
Cool.
And I was sitting out there with Amy from Sky Island Alliance, and it's been a great networking event. So
Yeah.
it's always good when something succeeds. You never know if it's gonna. So.
I know, it's scary before it gets going.
I thought I lost my iPad.
Oops.
Now we're good. Okay.
Actually, I've got some.
Are we ready to go, TV? Yeah? Okay. Welcome back. I have the pleasure of introducing our keynote speaker for our event today. We're very excited. Alison Hawthorne Deming is Regent Professor Emerita at the University of Arizona. She has 2 new books in 2025, not 1, 2. The Gift of Animals, Poems of Love, Loss, and Connection, and Blue Flax and Yellow Mustard Flower. She holds an MFA from Vermont College of Fine Arts and has received a fellowship from Stanford, the National Endowment for the Arts, the Borchardt Foundation, a Guggenheim Fellowship, and more. She is the former director of the University of Arizona Poetry Center. She founded the Field Studies in Writing program in 2015. And I'm going to plug her book, Zoologies, which is from 2014, which is my favorite one. So we have the pleasure of hearing Alison for the next little while, and I hope you very much enjoy. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric. Thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to the microphone for staying in its place. I'm delighted to be with you today, and I'm going to try to give you some encouragement and inspiration in a time when you probably could use a little. Ta-da. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but many of you probably were there. I know many of you are working in environmental sustainability, conservation biology, community building, and if you are, I also know that you are possibly outraged and quite probably feeling some grief. The issues are complex, but the moral imagination in the end is not that complex. We know that it is wrong to knowingly increase the suffering of others when we have a kinder alternative. Right? That's simple. Let's remember that. I'm going to try to bring the moral imagination into this conversation about new relationships between art and science as we try to grapple with the struggles of the environmental issues and the social justice issues. Of course, it's nothing new for writers to talk about the moral imagination. Shelley made this statement long ago in the 1800s. And the great instrument of the moral good is the imagination. Writers can imagine their way into feeling empathy for other creatures, for other humans, and they can make up stories that amazingly make us feel those emotions as well. It's so different from data, right? Of course, the scholars have plenty to say about the moral imagination. It's not as poetic as Percy Bysshe Shelley, of course, but here are a couple of a psychologist and a marketing professor writing in a textbook about the ethics of creativity, trying to bring some awareness of the moral imagination and its function and development in the creative arts. I'm going to talk about how it shows up in some books. Moby Dick. So Moby Dick, the story of a sea captain who's out in the first oil war, out hunting the whales for their oil before we had fossil fuel oils. And poor Ahab is loses his leg due to an attack, a vengeful attack by a white whale, and then he is obsessed with vengeance to try to kill the whale. So it's a story of the war, between, if you will, between capitalism and nature in the 19th century. And what's interesting is that, of course, we feel a great deal for Ahab and the passion of his struggle, but who wins in the end? The force of nature wins, the force of nature as embodied in the great white whale. So ultimately, we're made to feel empathy both for the whaler and what they suffer, but in the end, for the creatures that were the victims of that long assault on those magnificent animals in the sea. Here are a couple of contemporary books that also are examples of how the moral imagination works to stir our empathy. Barbara Kingsolver's Demon Copperfield was a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield. She sets the story of a poor boy growing up in disadvantaged circumstances in Appalachia. She wanted to write the great Appalachian novel. And this takes place in the coal-ravaged hills of the South, a boy who, and a land, both of which are abused. He becomes addicted to opioids, and her feeling as somebody who came from that region and had internalized all the judgments that she feels are put upon the rural poor and those who suffer from addiction, she wanted to create an experience of empathy for the reader so that they would begin to feel something for both the people and the land, which of course she's done in all of her books, always. She started out as a biologist, always. Her love for the land and the natural world is there, as well as her interest in what happens to human beings in wounded landscapes. My former student, Paco Cantu, Francisco Cantu, grew up Mexican-American in Prescott, Arizona, was so troubled about what was going on the border that he decided as a young, possibly foolhardy man to join the Border Patrol. Ended up writing this very, very powerful memoir, The Line Becomes the River, of a book of great empathy for the migrants and what they're suffering, and from someone who has borne witness both as a Border Patrol agent and as a friend and companion of some of the folks who have tried and tried and tried to sustain lives that they've had here for a very long time. Responsible, meaningful, community-connected lives that are disrupted by these inhumane border policies. So again, in Francisco's book, you see how the landscape, because of the harshness of the desert and the inhumane policies that have forced migrants into more remote and dangerous areas as they try to pass up here, you see how the landscape is part of the human story, how the landscape has been weaponized by these policies. So in these kinds of authors, we see the moral imagination helping us to feel something, both about the land and the people. So if we tell these kinds of stories with science, we tell those stories in numbers and data, right? But art speaks in image, story, emotion, uncertainty. We're okay with saying, gee, I really don't know what Melville meant about that whale. Is he really talking about the problem of vengefulness in human beings, or is he really talking about the incredible power of nature that even the most vengeful of human beings can't best? Perhaps he's talking about both. We can remain uncertain in art. In science, it's better if you don't remain uncertain, if you can answer a question and then find your next good question after that. The moral imagination does something different. It talks about what we care for. And it helps us clarify what we care for and where we would put our energies in the world in that care. I want to shift to give some deep time perspective on the relationship between art and science. I love this little carving. This was found in a cave in the Swabian Alps. This is a little lion-man chimera. Man's body, lion's head. It's about the size of a thumb, carved from a mammoth tusk. Imagine, with the tools available 42,000 years ago, the time and investment of energy and skill it took to create this beautiful little figure. It's rubbed very smooth, the way if you had a worry stone, right? You just kept rubbing it and rubbing it. So this is an object that was important. It represents an investment of time, both in the making and in the keeping of it, the holding of it, carrying of it, perhaps. And so is this art or is it science? Well, of course it's art, but it also has a pretty accurate scientific illustration of a lion. This one is even better as scientific illustration. This is from the Chauvet Cave in France, 30,000 years ago. And here you see both art and science. We don't have disciplines 30 or 40,000 years ago. We have the apprehension of nature, what's observed by being out there with these critters and really paying attention because they matter to us. And here, this beautiful, beautiful illustration of horses. Look how accurate they are in terms of the way they arch their heads when they run. These are probably I think it's a Przewalski horse. Is that I'm pretty sure the Przewalski horse, which are horses that predated the ones that we generally know, but that were certainly in Europe and Asia at this time. They have that brushy mane, and they're a little shorter and stouter. But these are, it's almost an animation with these horses kind of running together in the herd. So the observational skills are as good as a scientific illustrator, and yet the beauty is the beauty of an artist who knows how to render that feeling of motion, that feeling that horses run together. And there's a little rhino down below, which you can just barely see. So we see this beautiful, I think, fusion between art and science in these very, very early manifestations that come from the deep human past. And to me, they say something beautiful about what happens if we try not to separate art and science the way we have learned to do, to our advantage. Science is brilliant and wonderful and gives us many necessary and important things. On the other hand, art has been a beautiful way of apprehending the natural world for a long time, and we can bring these two together in meaningful ways. And I'm going to talk about a lot of interesting ways that's happening in our time. Of course, the big difference between art and science is art wants to have its name on the painting. The artist wants to have her, let's say, her handprint on the cave wall. So she blows the pigment around her hand so that the mark of the artist is on the wall. Scientist wants to obscure subjectivity, wants to be sure the data is verifiable, repeatable. It's not my subjective feeling, it's not my artwork. This is the way the world is. The artist wants to have it both ways. So let's leap now into the early 19th century. Some of you may know this wonderful and strange work by Alexander von Humboldt when he made his excursion, journey of discovery to South America. This is Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador. And I know it's kind of hard to see, but here's a guy, he's a Prussian naturalist, a guy of obviously a certain class to be able to make this kind of journey of discovery. But as he climbs the mountain, he documents all the plant species, at what elevation he finds them. That's all documented in these little grids on the side. But it's not enough to document the names, the places, the measurements. He also must draw some of the beauty that he's experienced, some of what it's like to experience a glorious mountain like this that he's never seen before. So here we see we're kind of at the bridge where art and science are going to start diverging, and Western science is going to take off. But here we see a scientific imagination that still needs and wants art. There's a beautiful biography of Alexander von Humboldt that many of you have probably read by Andrea Wolff, The Invention of Nature. And in it, or even in von Humboldt's work, you hear this. He's not afraid to be, as a scientist, he's really poetic. He's just off the charts in terms of writing like a poet, somebody who's high on nature. And so he doesn't yet have this interest in remaining an objective observer. He's great at getting the data, but that's not enough for him. Let's go leaping into the 20th century. This is a red fox painted by the artist Rumphius, who was a big artist in the 1930s. So I've got 3 or 4 slides here that look at the representation of animals and how that has changed over, say, the last 100 years. Really a very impossibly fast jump through time, but let's do it for the sake of time today. So this is the way many animals have been depicted, certainly in the 20th century, certainly in the 19th century. This is a kind of a celebrity fox, right? He's not part of an ecosystem. He's just up there on the rock. He's gorgeous. He's fluffy. He's looking around. He's the prince of the world. And we don't have to know anything about the ecosystem in which this animal lives or what are the systems upon which his life depends. Well, this is a sort of romantic view of the magnificent wild animal. Well, here's what happens to us in the 21st century. This is, and I think maybe even in the 20th, I can't remember when Chris Jordan started taking these photographs. This is a young albatross from Laysan Island in the Pacific. So Chris Jordan has been documenting and has made a very heartbreaking film about these birds. So this is near the Great Gyre in the Pacific where the plastics are floating around. And the albatrosses see these shiny, lovely things in the water, and sheer looks like a little fish, and bloop, they bring them and they feed them to the young. And so the young albatrosses die, absolutely loaded up with plastics. So we move from the celebrity, romanticized view of a nature not embedded in an ecosystem to an animal embedded in an ecosystem that has been so contaminated that the animal can't survive. Now, some artists are doing some really interesting things to help us see animals in a new way, not only in the tragic way, because it's not enough to be brokenhearted, right? We also have to fall in love with the animals enough that we want to try to do what we can to protect them and their habitat. This is a work by a sculptor named Kate Clark. She works with animal bodies that are taxidermied bodies. She doesn't kill them. This is a taxidermied zebra, and on the zebra body, she has created a human face. And she's done all kinds of animals, mostly African animals, with these human faces. And her idea is, not to sort of colonize the animal world with a human presence, but to say, would we feel more for the animals if they looked more like us? If they had a face like us, would we feel more and would we care more and would be more responsible in protecting their world? So this is, again, a chimera, like the lion man. And so here we see over 40,000 years or so, this interest in forms that combine the human and animal. I love her work. You can look her up. It's Kate Clark. She's got so many freaky pictures of animals that she's created. And some of them are just downright scary. This one I love. This is called Inert Wolf. This is by the Tlingit artist, Nicholas Galinan from Sitka, Alaska. This one often evokes the most emotional response from people when I show it to them. There's something about this wolf turned into a rug that still is rising up as if, resilient. Even from this condition, I will not be obliterated. Here I am. And yet, the sadness of it, and this, I think, the terrible sadness in its face is, you just can't help but feel for this animal, and certainly remember the importance of the wolf to the indigenous people of the North. And no thanks to the invented so-called direwolf that is just flooding the pages. All that money could have been spent to protect some actual animals in the world. It's not a direwolf, it's a mutt, because they don't, never mind. That's a whole other story. So we know that everyone probably knows this classic essay by C.P. Snow, who was a British novelist and physicist from 1959, where he spoke about the intellectual life of Western society being split into 2 camps. Not the political camps we're split into now, but he was speaking of the scientists and then the literary and artistic culture. And he felt that between the two, there was a complete gulf of incomprehension that could not be bridged. And he in particular faulted the literary people and the artists for not taking an interest in science, not being informed about science when science was so important. Well, C.P. Snow is looking kind of old and tired these days. There are so many projects going on that bring artists and scientists together. It's one of the most exciting things going on as far as I'm concerned. One of the earliest ones was, which has probably been defunded, I would imagine now, the National Science Foundation since the late 70s has been funding a project to send artists and writers to Antarctica out with the scientific teams. And they are not there to illustrate what the scientists are doing. They're there to do their own serious work. Artists at all levels of accomplishment have done this, including, I think Werner Herzog went, the great science fiction writer Kim Stanley Robinson went, the great poet from Utah, Catherine Coles went, all of them produced artistic works. But the fun thing is they're at the scientific field stations and they're hanging out with the scientists and they're getting inspired, and in some cases, they're making the scientists do freaky things. This is Lita Albuquerque at the Ross Ice Shelf at McMurdo Station. These green balls are being placed out on the ice, and they represent the location of the stars in the Andromeda spiral at the time of the solstice. So she gets 51 of the researchers to volunteer to go out and march in this spiral. In a way of, you know, there's a wonderful book by the environmental educator Mitch Thomashow called Bringing the Biosphere Home. Some of these concepts are so big: space, earth, climate change, carbon, whatever. And her idea was, let's bring space right here under our feet, and so that we're perceiving our galaxy through the feet on the ice. So these projects were all quite varied. Other similar projects that have cropped up, David Buckland is a British photographer. He's run a number of expeditions, mostly in the north. I think he's done some also in South America. And it's called the Cape Farewell Project, and he brings teams of scientists, artists, composers, poets out on these expeditions, and he himself creates these photographs where he's projecting light onto the glaciers and then of course the message, you know, whatever your message is, you're not only discounting the future, but their message is going to melt very soon. And so again, trying to get the message home in a very concrete way, in a new way of perceiving. Probably a lot of you know the novelist Ian McEwan, who he went on one of David Buckland's trips, and he wrote this book, Solar, which he said wasn't his best book. I haven't read it, so I don't know, but he has written some great ones. But I love what he said here, that we are shaped by our history and biology, and to frame our plans within the short term, within the scale of a single lifetime. Now we're asked to address the well-being of unborn individuals we will never meet and who, contrary to the usual terms of human interaction, will not be returning the favor. So we are asked to answer a new question. What is our responsibility to the future? And we haven't done a very good job answering it yet. I want to tell you about several other art science collaborative projects that I've been involved with. This one is at the H.J. Andrews Experimental Forest, which is on the eastern slope of the Cascades in Oregon, sort of between Eugene and Corvallis, Blue River, Oregon. There are, I think, 26 long-term ecological research stations, most of them in the U.S., and they've done important work that has changed over the years. The work at the Andrews began, I believe, shortly after World War II, and the question was, how can we get enough timber out of these northern woods to build all the homes that we need to build for folks coming back from the war who are building their families? And that morphed into, how do we make sure there's forest left after we do all this logging? And this is where the Northwest Forest Plan was developed to come up with some notions of sustainable forestry. It's also where the studies of the northern spotted owl have been done. So it's a much storied and researched forest. And they decided about a decade ago that they were concerned that the science message wasn't being listened to, that they didn't necessarily know how to communicate the science to the public. And so they decided to start inviting poets, artists, philosophers into the research site to work alongside the scientists. This was a brainchild of a wonderful earth scientist, Fred Swanson, and the environmental philosopher Kathleen Dean Moore. And so they ask these kinds of questions. These are the kind of scientific questions, you know, how do land use, natural disturbance, and climate change affect 3 key ecosystem properties, et cetera. So when they started bringing the poets and others into the sites, they made us go to 3 different research sites, and they wanted us to read the research papers from these sites. One was a site of a disturbance regime. It was a creek that had suffered tremendous flooding, periodic flooding. One was a clear cut in the forest, and one was the log decomposition site, which is one of the celebrity projects at the Andrews Forest. These are Doug firs that are lying on the forest floor, and they will take 200 years to decompose, right? So so when they started bringing artists and philosophers into the Andrews, they decided, okay, let's have our project have a 200-year horizon too. So they're getting materials from artists and writers and building the forest log archive of all of our creative works. And I've published a lot of poems and essays at this site. But this site has been particularly resonant for the artists because, okay, what are we looking at here? We're looking at death in the forest, right? On the other hand, doesn't it look beautiful and inviting? Isn't that the way you'd like to go? I mean, it's so, and of course, poets are all into thinking about death and how do we manage this problem into which we're all born. So I think the most amazing poems have come out of this log decomp site because, you know, of course, they're studying what organisms use these resources, what is the carbon sequestration involved in these, all kinds of ecosystem service questions related to these trees. But the poets are kind of taking off on this notion of a different conception of time, big time, thinking about our lifespan and the lifespan of these trees and how there is some beauty in being part of a natural cycle and understanding that you're part of the natural cycle and that death is part of that. What's that mean? The work at the Andrews came out in part of Kathleen Dean Moore's interest in the practical syllogism of Aristotle. And this is an important thing, I think, and a helpful thing to think about when we think about art science and the moral imagination. So the practical syllogism is a way of reasoning that helps us get to thinking about what are the actions we should take in the world that will be beneficial. So we start out with premise 1. This is the way the world is. This is the normative premise. This is the way the world is. The world is damaged unless there are anthropogenic changes, that unless we take some pretty dramatic changes soon are going to be quite devastating for human life and certainly for the more than human world. And what do we do about it? We tend to have polarized arguments and not do much and swing between trying to do something and then trying to say, ha, I'll prove to you. They don't have to do anything. We can just use everything up on this planet. So this is the way the world is. Okay. Now, we keep trying to, and we have a lot of data, right? We have a lot of data to tell us this is the way the world is. Science gives us this, and it's brilliant. We keep trying to get to the conclusion, this is what we ought to do. And we keep screwing up, right? Because we're not doing it. Well, what the practical syllogism tells us is we have to spend more time on the second premise. This tells us, what is it that we value? What do we believe is right? How do we think the world ought to be? So if you value money over anything else, then what you ought to do is rape the earth, get more coal, who cares about the animals? If what you value is We live on an astonishing planet, and we have a responsibility to cherish it, to tend it, to care for others, and to care for the ecosystems that have supported us and given us our lives. If we share some of those values, then what we ought to do is be a little smarter about how we shepherd our resources, how we make political decisions that will affect the future. But we're spending a lot of time with data and a lot of time barking at each other about what we ought to do, and not enough time. What do we value? What do we really believe is right? What do we really believe we would like the world to be 10 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now? Again, what is our responsibility to the future based on what is the world that we would value? Not what is the world that we have trashed and gotten as much out of it as we could, and we're fine. So this is a very helpful thing to think about in a time when many of us are feeling confused and overwhelmed, is to articulate again and again, what do we value? What do we think is right? What do we think we ought to do to have the world that we think we'd like to have? All right, this is a whole semester, right, Eric? I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I want to spend a little time on this slide, the short history of environmental lit, because it is interesting thinking about the changes in it. So, you know, the first wave of environmental literature is the literature of witness. It's von Humboldt, Tracking and a Voyage of Discovery. It's Charles Darwin, right? The Voyage of the Beagle. Wonderful, wonderful book of environmental witness. A beautiful book if you've never read it. Here in the Southwest, John Wesley Powell goes crazy down the Grand Canyon, you know, Colorado River with his one-arm journey and makes it unbelievable. Maybe Mary Austin, Land of Little Rain. So these are writings bearing witness to the natural world as they're experiencing it. In the mid-20th century, we begin to get a different kind of environmental literature, which is more based in advocacy. The two probably great figures, Aldo Leopold, Sand County Almanac and the Land Ethic, and Rachel Carson. Silent Spring, probably the most influential environmental book ever written that helped ban DDT and bring about the Environmental Protection Agency. And Aldo Leopold was extraordinarily important in teaching us that the sphere of human moral regard moves out in concentric circle. First, we care about our family, right? We're going to take care of them. And we might care about our community or our tribe. Yeah, we're going to take care of them. We might care about our nation. We're going to take care of them. We might take care of the globe. We might. So, but what Leopold says is that sphere of moral regard has to extend beyond the human world. It's not enough just to take care of our own kind. We are embedded in a complex world that is biologically interwoven in marvelous ways, and that the moral sphere of our concern should extend beyond the human world. So now, of course, climate disruption has affected our literature, and we see Bill McKibben, who broke all of our hearts early on with The End of Nature and continues to do so with his brilliant analysis of the data of climate change. We have Elizabeth Colbert writing about the sixth extinction, a tremendous science journalist, and many other writers documenting where we are. Well, we also have an interesting thing happening now more and more, and that is the bringing together of ecology and justice. The notion that it's not enough if we protect a planet if we are not taking care of the people who have the fewest advantages. I remember when I first moved to the Southwest, and I was involved with trying to help protect the Ironwood, what became the Ironwood National Monument, which we successfully did outside of Tucson. And I was talking to Ben Saenz, who's a writer friend in El Paso, Texas, about this, and I was all, you know, he's a Mexican-American guy, and I was all pumped up, you know, yeah, we're working on this project, Ben, it's really exciting, and we're gonna protect this land for the future. And he said to me, Mexican-American kid growing up in disadvantaged circumstances in New Mexico, who are you trying to protect it for? Not my people. And it was like, you know, a light bulb went off in my head, unless we're also thinking about what are we doing for the people who are suffering the most in our area and in our desert, then we're not doing enough. So we're seeing more and more works that bring together ecology and justice. I mentioned Francisco Cantu's book. I think Lydia Millett, the wonderful novelist, certainly brings these concerns together. I think some of the early writers who did this, Leslie Marmon Silko, certainly early on with her novels. And now what's super fun is we're looking at how in environmental literature can we speak of new alliances. And many of those new alliances are between art and science. And some of them are also looking for those voices that we haven't heard. Whose voices? We know that environmental literature has been wider than most American literature. It's been slower to diversify, really slow, right? Now we're seeing a lot of interest in what are the new voices? Let's bring them forth and let's hear the stories that we haven't heard. So the new alliances involve a lot of cultural stories and also sometimes the stories of women. This book by Melissa Sevigny, if any of you read it, is really great. This just the follow-up to John Wesley Powell. These two women were botanists from the Midwest who took a trip in 1938 in a miserably small little boat down the Colorado River, and they documented all of the plant life along the river. It was the first botanical survey of the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, and Melissa Sevigny has written a fantastic book. It's an adventure story. It is worth reading. It's worth teaching. She's wonderful. She's a science writer. She's based up at NAU. She does, you might have heard her on public radio. She does science reports up there. So those were voices, you know, who heard about these two botanists? Oh, I could tell you their names, but this is, see? I don't even know their names. I'll tell them. Elzada Clover and Lois Jotter. Well, we'll start remembering their names along with John Wesley Powell's. And then this book by David Masmatsumoto, whose family were sent to the Japanese incarceration camps during the Second World War. They were fruit farmers in California. And he has written many very beautiful books, both about his time as a child there, and then about the resilience of the family orchards once they were able to bring them back. There's also a new book just out by Tucson writer Brandon Shimoda about his family's experience in the Japanese internment camps. So it's a good moment to be thinking about how we have been imprisoning people who we perceived as threats, who were not really threats by and large. But these are two beautiful examples of the new voices. There are plenty of them, and we could come up with many more examples if we had all day. But I recommend those two to you. So a couple of other projects I've been involved with. One was, two of them actually, sponsored by Poets House in New York City. These are projects sponsored by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, which has just been defunded, along with everything else that we care about. Federal agency, and this was the language of conservation that was intended to bring poetry into zoos around America. There are something like, wait a minute, I want to get my data right. There are 150 million visitors to zoos every year. More people go to zoos than go to athletic events, if you count it all up. So this is a huge constituency for animals. And I know a lot of people are creeped out by zoos, and there are certainly issues about zoos and the captivity of animals. But this is a place where a lot of education is done and a lot of conservation work is done by the good ones. So this project was inspired by George Schauer, the great conservation biologist, and appeal to conservation must reach the heart, not just the mind. Here's a slide that demonstrates what he might have meant. This is from a field research station run by Bowdoin College up on a little island in the Bay of Fundy, Canada. On the left, you see all the data that's been collected with the blood samples of these little savanna sparrows who migrate from, yes, Savannah, Georgia, all the way up. They migrate from the American South up to the Canadian Maritimes, and then they nest in the grass. They're very vulnerable little animals. There are seagulls coming, you know, dive bombing, trying to get the chicks and the eggs all the time. So here on the left, we have the data log that this young scientist is keeping with the blood samples. They're doing genetic studies. They're tracking their migration patterns, the changes in the migration. They've studied their song culture, fascinating research. Data on the left. On the right, look at this kid's face. This is an ornithologist. I think he was from Guelph University in Canada. And he's taking a little sample out of this tiny days-old chick, taking a little blood sample. And there's nothing on that man's face except love. Now, when he documents his research for his PhD dissertation, he's not going to be able to put his love in there. And that's why we need art and science together to tell the story of what's it like to do science. To do science can be to fall in love with your research subject. And we can use a little more love, couldn't we? I love that picture of him. One of my students wrote a poem called Ode to a Bird Bander's Face for him. So the Language of Conservation put up poetry installations in several zoos, one at the Central Park Zoo in New York, Let the Beauty We Love Be What We Do. This is from a poem by W.H. Auden that's on the edge of the city perimeter there. I'm not going to take the time to read it. There was a social science evaluation done, the exit interviews. After all of these exhibits were put in place, they interviewed people before they went into the zoo and when they came out. And a lot of people said, oh, were those poems? They said, did you like the poems? What do you mean poems? Well, the thing, oh yeah, that was cool. There was an increase in people seeing that we were part of ecosystems and that we had a role in the stewardship. I got to do one of these poetry installations at the Jacksonville Zoo and Gardens. This was a poem from Wordsworth. What we have loved, others will love, and we will teach them how. So yes, we have this capacity for compassion and empathy, but it is something we need to educate because we can see that hate can be educated, right? We can educate one another's empathy, and poetry is very good at that. We had an exhibit in the Endangered Amphibians Hall. I wonder if my children's children come this way, we'll see the great forest spread green and tall for them as it has spread for me. This was by a Guyanese poet, Ian MacDonald. Here's a poem for children by the children's poet Charles Genga. Snakes are clever, snakes are fast. If you see one, let it pass. This zoo really knocked it out of the park. They made a map, they made a scavenger hunt for the poems. It was really fun to work with them. Here's a wonderful poem some of you may know by the African-American poet Camille Dungy. I think this has been in just about every exhibit in a zoo around the country. Ask me if I speak for the snail, and I will tell you I speak for the snail. I speak for the damselfly, water-skeet mollusk, the caterpillar, the beetle, the spider, the ant. I speak from the time before spinelessness was frowned upon. I did another project in Milwaukee, similar project bringing together poetry and science. They did a little different thing with their displays. With their displays, they put a poem excerpt and then a scientific passage below it. So people could see both. They could take their pick, or they could read both, but it was a slightly different approach, but again, fun to work with. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't like poetry, they don't understand poetry, poetry's weird, I didn't get the hidden meaning, but I love this quote by Tolstoy. This is all you have to think about. The purpose of poetry is to infect the world with feeling, and so induce a change of conscience, a change in care for the injured and poor, human and otherwise. So here's some things that I think happen if art and science can work together as co-creators. Art can enrich the concepts of science, as with the experience and data, images. Art can spur our emotions and the moral imagination. Art can enhance science communication with new language that shapes the way we see, remember, and imagine. In fresh language, encourages asking novel questions, conceiving new ideas, discovering unexpected relationships that can lead to innovative solutions. And this one I think is really important these days. You know, we used to think, oh, artists and poets, they're like the little peons and the scientists are the big authorities. But these days, I think it's extremely good for artists and humanists and writers to say to the scientists, I've got your back, because science is being censored, suppressed, defunded, and we need our science. So as an artist, I'd like to say I've got your back, and I'd love a scientist to say, hey man, I've got your back too, because I see it counts what you're doing. All right, just a few more strange, wonderful art projects that I really love. This is a Canadian artist, Peter van Tiesenhausen, who used to be a large equipment operator, inherited some land from his family that had been a family farm, and it was about to be gobbled up for fracking exploration. So he copyrighted his land by turning it into a work of art in which he built 8.5 yards of fence every year, and the goal was to build, I don't know, I forget how much, 100 or several hundred yards of fencing, but he could only do 8.5 a year, so it was copyrighted for the duration of his project, and he managed to pull that off legally. Very smart. Here's one. All right, this is amazing. I happened to have been in Paris with my daughter doing some research when the terrorist attacks of November 2015 happened. And as you'll recall, the Paris Climate Accords gathering was to occur just a few days after that. And so nobody was allowed to gather in groups. And here were thousands of people coming from all over the world on behalf of the climate. So what did the organizers do? Did they lie down and say, oh my God, we don't know what to do now, it's so terrible? No. They created this picture, hard to see. This is 10,000 pairs of shoes in the Place de la République. These are shoes from the Dalai Lama, shoes from the Pope, shoes from the living, shoes from the dead. If they won't let us be here in person, we will put our shoes here in support of the climate accord. 10,000 pairs of shoes. I thought that was so beautiful. It shows something about how indomitable the human spirit can be when it wants to give a message that feels essential and necessary for its moment in time. Here's another one by the Mexican sculptor Palas por Pistolas, shovels for pistols. This was in Culiacan, which had the highest rate of handgun murders in all of Mexico at the time. So with the support of the city government, they launched this project where they gathered together 1,527 guns. They turned them into 1,527 shovels, and they planted 1,527 trees in cities that had suffered gun violence, in neighborhoods in cities that had suffered gun violence, Mexico City, San Francisco, and others. How inspiring, how beautiful. So we feel so frustrated. What can I do? What can I do? The creative imagination has endless ideas for what we can do that kind of get you, right? It kind of gets you, right? Beautiful vision. Some of you may have seen this. This is Kikito. This is the little toddler. This was made by a French artist, J.R., who usually takes pictures of people and plasters them on big buildings. And he posted this toddler on the Mexican side of the border. It's on a kind of scaffolding. And this was the first picture he posted of the artwork when it went up, and with these Border Patrol agents there. And it's such a, you know, the juxtaposition between the total innocence of this child and the wall and the militarization of the border is just kind of like, yeah, what are we doing? Well, what JR said about this was, he said he envisioned this was a child growing up in Mexico who, you know, every day came over, looked over the wall, didn't know what the wall was, they're just looking around, didn't have a sense of wall, didn't have a sense of politics, it was just a thing in its landscape. And somehow, in a moment, it just shook people away from, it gave them a new way to see things. And when he posted this, this image had 1 million views on JR's site. And there's just something very beautiful about that child's innocence that helps us to see anew. How do we help to get people to see things differently? Maybe art can help. All right, I'm almost at the end. Project I'm working on right now with a group of musicians and scientists is this Watershed Soundscape project. We've done performances of the material, music and text and art at the Empire Ranch Adobe Barn, historic Adobe Barn, Patagonia Opera House, Water Management Group, and they're performing this music with my text in 22 high school group musical ensembles around Tucson, and the Tucson Symphony Orchestra's Young People's Concerts in May will be performing these works. So a new way to educate the people about the importance of our watershed in this arid land. This is this wonderful she-wolf by a mixed-race, a native guy, Chinooka, Hans Scott Luger, of mixed Indian and European descent. So this is a very large wolf. Much of his work is collectively made. It has a steel armature underneath, and its beautiful flowered kind of coat is made of, I think it's 800 bandanas created by people from communities all over the globe. So this was a collective project to call people's attention to building community around making a statement about the human connection with the animal world and how beautiful and important that is. There's so many ways to tell and retell what we care about and why. So that's it. And I hope you feel slightly encouraged that there are just endless ideas out there to be found if you maybe reach outside of your discipline and your area of expertise and the conversations you usually have to seek for some new conversations. I'm quoting myself here in my last slide from an essay that I wrote in this book, and my encouragement to you is be artful, inventive, and just, but do not be silent. We need your voices. Thank you.
In appreciation of Alison's talk, we would like to present her with this plaque and thank her again for her presence today at our Climate Community Day.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
Thank you so much. The sense of community today, I know it's called Climate Community Day, we did that for a reason, but after lunch, after we've had some time to process, and after feeling these connections, I just have to call attention to that. So next we are going to have our climate career panel. So I'm going to ask Miguel and Julie and Matt to come join us on the stage. Maybe we can use the ramp over here. And we'll get settled and start our next portion of our climate career panel.
Yes, I got the connector, I got the jump drive. My plaque, that's so sweet.
Our students made this.
That's really sweet.
That's really sweet.
Nice to meet you, Matt.
Nice to meet you also. How are you?
Good.
Good.
I was looking for you earlier, but
No, I kept missing you today too. We'll catch up. Okay, good.
All right, we've been through the whole experience today, from kind of inception of plans and programs to student experience, and now kind of out into our community and into the quote-unquote real world, right, of our careers and businesses and economies. and just trying to hit each of those pieces along the way. So I have these three amazing human beings with me to discuss a little bit about how they see climate action, sustainability skills, knowledge, all of that good stuff in their career fields and what it may look like in the future as well. So to start us off today, if you guys would just each introduce yourselves and a little bit about yourself and your titles, and then we'll go on to more specific questions. Miguel, let's go ahead and start with you.
Oh, ladies first. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's what I thought. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Miguel Cruz. I don't know if you can hear me. I work with Tucson Federal Credit Union. I started with them around 11 years ago, doing all the marketing, branding, and specifically something that is pretty much what I do is community engagement. So for many, many years, since 1991, I have been working here in Tucson in different capacities, specifically in the areas of finance, marketing, media. In my past life, I'm a doctor. I'm a veterinary science degree from Mexico, and I work in a eradication program with the USDA and the Mexican Agricultural Department. And it was a very interesting project that allowed me to really be creative, also be in touch with science, and also developing something that I use in the business, which is a lot of creativity and imagination. So I have been here in Tucson, as I mentioned, since 1991 in different industries. And currently what I do, focusing a lot into the community engagement within Pima County, is to start establishing the relationship between business and obviously the environment and many other things that within the business is not too much there. And I should probably hear my colleagues will be able to help us out to navigate this intersection between business, science, and obviously the environment. Thank you.
You're welcome to remove the microphone too. You guys don't have to use the stands. It's totally fine. Whatever works for you.
Yeah, maybe that'd be better. I'm Julie Hendricks. I work for JLL. I'm an architect and a sustainability consultant. And JLL is a giant real estate company. I mentioned earlier that real estate, which basically just means buildings, contribute 40%, more than 40% to global carbon emissions. So in the business I'm in, we are huge contributors to climate change. Therefore, it is our responsibility to look for ways to mitigate it, and that is my job. I work for large companies that are looking for ways to mitigate climate change through changes to their building portfolios, which is just a way of saying a lot of buildings, all the buildings that they own. It's a great job, it's a lot of fun, and there's a huge amount of potential and need for people to enter my industry and do the kind of work that I do.
Good afternoon, I'm Matt Vaccaro. I work for Train Technologies, and my entire career since I got out of school, which was, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago maybe, I have, like Julie, worked in the building automation, mechanical services, and energy services business. And I work with what we call enterprise level accounts, so JLL. We work with Pima Community College, think about cities, think about high-rise buildings, because, again, as Julie said, they consume so much energy in this world. And my mission in life is not so much to sell the air conditioning that my company manufactures, but rather to put together projects that have a sustainability quotient to it, an energy savings component to it. There was a time when we were able to leverage some tax incentives to do some of that stuff. We're hopeful it'll come around again. And to be able to reduce the overall carbon footprint of such large facilities within our world. My responsibility is just here in Arizona, but trust me, there's plenty to do.
Thank you all. So you already shared a little bit about how climate and sustainability show up in your work. I'm interested to know what you think the biggest climate-related challenges and maybe future or current opportunities there are in your career field for people who understand and can move forward with climate and sustainability challenges and solutions.
Well, I have one answer. Maybe someone else can weigh in afterwards with other answers, but I would say from my perspective as a professional in the building industry, the biggest challenge is the vast numbers of existing buildings that are currently generating tons of carbon and that need to be decarbonized in alignment with our climate goals. This is going to take huge amounts of expertise and huge amounts of money, much of which has not yet been committed. So I would say that is the #1 challenge, trying to figure out where the money and expertise for this huge transition is going to come from.
No, I think I totally agree with this because in the financial industry, obviously commercial banks, I work for a credit union, which is the same but not the same. The challenge is that there is in the lack of understanding and developing the products specifically when it comes to loans, from construction loans, what they call it now the green loans. And there is a lot of, I want to say, resistance to really even acknowledge that there is a fact of life. And as a business, we need to start evolving to see what are the things that we need to do in order to provide not just the businesses, but also the consumers, the residential individuals, the consumers who are obviously looking for better ways of energy solutions. Currently, I sit on the board of Tucson IDA on the Green Bank, which is the Groundswell Capital. There is a lot of funds right now that are available for the consumer sector, but unfortunately, the level of promotion is very limited. So we have to take these type of opportunities to let you know that you can go and apply to do a solar panel, air conditioning, windows type of projects. But those are kind of the challenges that we have in the industry, financial industry, because there is not a lot of, I don't want to say awareness, but rather will to really start defining some products that will help companies and specific individuals that they want to have a more sustainable type of environment at home. So it's a big, big challenge right now for us too.
So I will tell you that prior to 10 minutes ago, the three of us had not met, and we did not rehearse our answers.
Yes.
But my answer falls into the same category, and the way I would frame it is what I call competing priorities. Even though we know that doing energy efficiency, sustainability, those types of projects, we still have to financially justify those expenditures with our customers. And it goes into the annual budget for all the other things that any business in whatever category they're in, whether they're an educational institution, a manufacturing plant, or what have you, that they have a limited amount of resources to spend money on. And oftentimes, if we can't make a compelling return on investment or produce an IRR or internal rate of return that the shareholders, or in the case of private owners, demand, then those projects fall by the wayside, just like many others do. So that's our biggest challenge is, and that's why, frankly, during the last administration, when the Inflation Reduction Act was announced, and there was many millions of dollars to do lots of energy efficiency projects and help to offset a lot of those costs. I did a project, and I'll reference it when we get to projects, but just to give you a highlight, once we applied the tax incentives to it, it reduced the return on investment by 3 years. And it was almost a $4 million project, so you can imagine how large the tax incentive was on it. So yeah, my answer is the same as the two of you, right? It's all about the money. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Transitioning a little bit to current workforce and future workforce and what you'd like to see from it. What kinds of sustainability-related skills or knowledge do you wish more people had when they're entering into your organizations? And kind of going off of that as well is, how would sustainability literacy in a job applicant make them stronger in your opinion?
Okay. You guys want me to go first? Okay. So I have a couple answers. I'm trying to remember all the questions in the order that you asked them. I might ask you to repeat them. Yeah, right. I think that the skills that are most beneficial with a sustainability education that we would find most valuable, at least within our industry, is what we were just talking about, is financial analysis. Honestly, it's not something I learned till mid-career. You know, it was all about just what the cost was on a particular item. But now there's so many other factors, and it's not just the cost, it's not just the energy savings, it's not just the tax credit, it is the rebates, it's the operational cost, it's the return on investment or the increase in property value, a number of different things that go into it. So I think that the sooner that young people who are entering our industry understand and be able to speak financially literate about what we do, I think will be a very employable skill.
I may just add to what we call in different sectors, you have to start learning different languages. Accounting, finance is one of them. Technology is another one. In addition to whatever you're doing, like as I mentioned, I did marketing, branding, media, advertising, all of that comes from the creativity side of my brain. But on the other side, you have to be able to learn also the nuances of the finance, so you can put actually a P&L in a campaign that you're going to be developing. It's kind of expecting some revenue, all of the different characteristics that you have to put in order for the budget to be approved. So you have to start learning all those different languages, right, that they are within the business community. Specifically now, when we talk about environment and sustainability, it's a whole gamut of terminology and science-related aspects. When we talk about carbon, well, I'm sure we know we're in the audience that understands that concept, but there's out there on the community that people don't talk about it. They have heard, right? But unfortunately, the level of knowledge to what that means is very limited. And we are not going into a rabbit hole of politics, but as we know, science has been under attack because they're able to kind of put some what do they call it, that science is not real, 100% certain. So a little bit of uncertainty becomes another issue. So you have to really put a lot of aspects into your analytical thinking, right, into the decision-making process and learning all those language. And also be honest with yourself. When you don't know something, just ask, right? Because a lot of times we pretend knowing, and then we get in trouble because we thought that we knew and we don't. So there is a lot of different skills, but if I want to say, just kind of summarize all my rabbit hole things that I do, is really start learning a lot of different languages. And yes, a foreign language will be also useful as well.
I'll build on what Matt and Miguel just said. These are really good points. Well, I would say when I am looking for young people to hire, one of the key things, I'm a consultant. So we serve all kinds of clients, and one of the key things we'll be looking for is someone who can communicate with a client in a language that they understand. So I would almost say the number one skill would be communication. Can you speak to the client about the issues that they care about the most, and which means you have to know your audience. And we started talking about money because almost all our clients care about money, no matter who they are, they care about money. And so if we make an argument about how their buildings are going to be devalued, if they don't implement strategies we're recommending, that may resonate. But not every audience is that audience. I would argue the one we're talking to right now might be more moved by arguments about common good. So if I talk to you about common good, I might be doing a better job in communicating with you. So ideally, the workforce of the future will know how to communicate in a way that will get the message across. That's so powerful.
Yep.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, we're gonna get into some specific projects here so we can really imagine what it is that you guys do in your field. So can you share a real-world project or decision that you've worked on that had a sustainability or climate-related component, and what did you learn from it?
They are the experts. I'm not into that, but as they think their answer, as I mentioned, I'm a veterinarian. I was epidemiologist of a program, eradication program. And basically what we did in Mexico is to recreate a fly, an insect, and then reproduce it artificially, sterilize with atomic energy, and then release it in infested areas from southwest of the US all the way to Panama. And in order for us to do that, we have to be able to really be very creative and create and develop different sustainable type of production processes because you are working with an insect. And specifically at the last phase of the program is that we have to put all those insects in boxes. And those boxes have to be biodegradable. Now, I'm talking in the 70s, I know that old, but in the 80s when I started working in the program, that's basically what we have to do. We have to be able to kind of do a lot of research, trying to find the real, a good vendor who will provide insecticide-free type of cardboard so we can actually develop the boxes so we can put the flies, we can put them in airplanes and where we can release it on infested areas. And then we have a very cool program that from there, we're working in Mexico. And then an infestation came in North Africa, in Tripoli, Libya, and then we have to transport flies from southern Mexico, Chiapas, all the way to Tripoli, Libya. And we had to follow the same process, but we have to be able to, we didn't know we were doing something related to sustainability or environmental. We were just doing research. And that's something that it was really stuck in my professional development here in the US, because all of those skills that I learned, I apply them when I start into the business world. Because it's a lot of analytical thinking, it's a lot about creativity, it's a lot about what if, and start also asking those different questions that now when I'm working in financial business, the brain is still there, asking those questions. How we define the problem first. Because unfortunately, sometimes we work in a lot of the solutions without us defining 100% what the problem is. And I think that's something that I continue working here with my colleagues at Tucson Federal Credit Union, because if we want to do something, we want to make sure that all of us, whoever is at the table, that we have a very clear understanding in what the problem is, and instead of us jumping right away into the solution.
I can go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my current project because it's pretty cool and I'm proud of it. And I'm working for a major financial services company, and they are creating all their new bank branches as zero carbon. So we're trying to roll out this very large program across the whole country for every one of their new branches, of which there's about 200 a year. And so the question was, what have I learned from this? And that's where I was originally balking, because there are just so many possible lessons that I have taken from this. But I guess one of the things it's done is reinforce a lesson I've had to learn many times throughout my career, which is that it comes down to, and I'm going to go back to my previous statement, it comes down to my ability to communicate with all the different parties who are building these buildings across the whole US. They all do things differently. The way buildings get built across the whole country actually varies quite a bit, maybe more than you would think. And every one of these parties is motivated by different things. Sure, they're all motivated by money, but in addition to that, they have different regulatory environments, they have different financial constraints, they have different levels of expertise and availability of materials in their neighborhoods. And so my ability to communicate with each of them in a way that understands their constraints is my best weapon when I am trying to make this happen in very diverse environments. So that may be the main thing that I've learned. Communication, better communication is the key to almost everything.
So since I like to talk, I have two projects actually, but I'll be brief, I promise. I won't hog up extra airtime, all right? So a project that I mentioned earlier that we reduced the return on investment by 3 years was a project actually up in the Phoenix area at Tempe Town Lake. You guys know those big blue buildings on Tempe Town Lake for State Farm. We did a big lighting retrofit for them. And so the whole goal there was to improve the working environment in there. We did dimming capability off of lighting and a number of other technologies. And so they wanted to know what all the savings were and the rebates and what have you. But when we got down to the final presentation with them, they also wanted to know about sustainability equivalence, i.e., what did we recycle off of the project? So we did the calculation, and we were proud to say that we actually recycled 97% of the materials that we used on that particular project. There was like 168 pounds that went to the garbage. So that was a surprising outcome that was really important to them, but again, lesson learned for other projects. And then the other example I'll give is, right here in this room. So, so we put together a project with Pima Community College. It goes back, we're just finishing it actually, going on almost 3 years. We've touched all the campuses for a number of energy efficiency projects. And again, like the State Farm, it was all about how much can they get in rebates. Actually, Tucson Electric Power, to their credit, has issued over $1 million in rebates to Pima Community College through this particular project. I know, it's huge. And so we thought it was all about the energy savings and reduction in operational costs and all of that. And what I have learned through meeting with Crystal and Phil Berry, Sustainability Director in the back, is that there's all these other sustainability equivalents and savings and, as you said before, the soft side of all of this, right? That plays into it. And so now what we're going to do is we're leveraging some of that information that we've learned, and that will find its way into some of the sustainability courses, and it will go to some of the objectives that Phil is trying to meet for his sustainability objectives across all the different campuses. So frankly, it's been really rewarding to not only do a financially viable project, but now one that's got all sorts of other benefits to it. So, there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm done. I'll shut up.
This is for like the mid-term, long-term type of goals. What is this? I mean, when you start looking into the recycling the products, that's something that wasn't planned, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's always part of our projects to recycle it, but we never really kept track of it. It was like, okay, we don't send that stuff to the landfill, we do it. But when we did the calculation, because it was important to the customer, we said, oh, we did a really good job and didn't even know it. And now we know it's important to people. So that's how that came about.
I imagine each time you do it, then you know you can for your next client, right? And then it
Part of the project.
yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I was wondering if you have any advice for students who are interested in building a career with impact, but aren't sure where to start.
Okay.
No, well, I think reinvention, I mean, to me is, yes, you can start, and I'm just talking about my own lived experience, right? You can start this because I was, and still I am, a science geek. I love science. The reason that I went to veterinary science is because when I was in high school in senior year, a professor came from the College of Medicine, and he explained in an hour how a cow eats 20 pounds of grass and eats a pound of meat. And to me, it was like, wow. So I went into that rabbit hole in terms of science, right, which I applied in Mexico. But then as I came here in the US, I was 28, 29, and I had to reinvent it myself. So reinvention, even if you know that today you know where you want to go, there is going to be another opportunities for you, and that's exactly trying to find that that's an opportunity and jump and bring in everything that you have already learned and trying to learn more, right? Is the famous thing about now is you learn, unlearn, relearn. So I think it's some of the things that I consider more into the reinventing yourself every time that you have an opportunity.
Oh my gosh, that's a great point. Totally agree with that. And I was going to say something similar, which is, I think this question is hard to answer at first brush because you have to do you. Like your path within sustainability is the thing that you love plus sustainability, whatever that is. I mean, for me, I was an architect and I was interested in buildings, and then I was interested in sustainability, and the intersection of those two things is a really cool career. But the intersection of sustainability with every other topic that anyone in this room is interested in is a really cool career for somebody.
Again, we did not rehearse our answers. I've worked for a half a dozen different large corporations in America doing different varieties of what we do in sustainability. And although I've enjoyed each one led to something else that was another offshoot area or interest that I learned something else that, to use your term, Miguel, reinvented myself a bit. And now, at this point in my career, I have this whole toolbox of skills that I've learned throughout my career, and a lot to be proud of. And none of it was intentionally planned. I was just fortunate to be in a wonderful industry, to have an interest in what it is that we do, to have a passion for it, to actually care about the world and want to make a difference. And it just led me kind of from one thing to another.
Yeah, and to me, just to bring that into sustainability, what I do, because I know I have worked a lot in the community and specifically learning about a lot of nonprofits. And it has taken me around 2 or 3 years until finally this year, our focus for some of the grants for Tucson Federal Credit Union are going to be specifically into those nonprofits who are doing sustainable work in Pima County. So as I said, without not knowing, I was doing that. And then when obviously, because that was part of the passion to say, okay, how do we do all those different things? How do we reduce waste? How do we do all those different things that I even as a consumer at home, I always have a conversations with my lovely wife about, do we really need this? Right, especially when it comes to Amazon, right? It's like, man, there's big boxes, and why do we need a little envelope in a big box? So you start thinking that way, and then obviously you translate that into your work. And even though we're not doing anything, an amazing work like here, my 2 colleagues, at least I bring in that sense of awareness into the executives of Tucson Federal Credit Union. And as I mentioned, this year, we're really pushing those nonprofits and supporting nonprofits who are doing sustainable work in Tucson. So, yeah. Push sustainability all the time.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for many of us, one thing I would say to students is that probably none of us started our career with the position that we're currently in as any kind of, dream even, right? And so I think in this space, sometimes it's about taking that first step and then creating something new. This is all being co-created as we go, and I think that's really important. So on that note of, how we've all learned throughout our career, what do you wish you had known about sustainability or climate action earlier in your career?
That it existed. No, it's true, because, we live in a world, it's just consumption, right? And we don't really are conscious to all the things that takes to even build a shirt, right? Or the shoes or whatever. We know it comes from leather. Leather comes from cows. Well, if you are wearing some cows. And things like that. And you are not really familiarized with the level of consumption and all the different input that it takes just to produce something, a pencil, a pen. So all of that, I think, is important. And I think we're in a good time right now because there is more awareness. There is different channels of communication and distribution that we can actually put the message out there that it does exist. And there are different organizations doing a lot of great work, educationally speaking. The Pima Community College, when I had the opportunity to meet with Phil and Crystal, I didn't know that Pima had a sustainability department. So that's what I said, that exists. So yeah, so thank you for doing that.
I'll say something that's a little like a shameless plug for your class, which is I wish that I had more background in systems thinking. One of the things we were never talked about when I was in architecture school is where do materials come from, and how do buildings impact watersheds, and how do they impact land use, and all of this is incredibly, all of the systems of the world obviously are linked and have this huge impact on climate change, and I did not have a good understanding of any of that, and I still don't have a great understanding. It's so complicated. I wish that they had covered it more in school.
Yes, agreed.
I'll go back to one of the earlier points that we talked about, and that I'll call it financial literacy. I never really began to understand all of that until mid-career, so in all seriousness, that was at least 20 years ago. But had I known that at that point, much of my career would have been much less transactional and a lot more financially justified to have a bigger impact on the types of projects that I've been involved in. So If I could go back in time and change that, that's the one thing I would say that is so important to learn earlier rather than later.
Totally agree.
Thank you. All right, I have, and the next question's a little bit more, abstract, but if there was one mindset shift you hope students could take away from learning about sustainability, something that they'll carry with them into any profession, what might that shift in mindset be? I got some shy ones up here.
I think the mindset shift that you should think about making sooner rather than later in your career is, and I had this discussion earlier today with somebody about, well, there's so much to do and we'll never get it all done and I don't know how we're ever going to solve all these problems. You're right, but it's got to start with you. So, and I gave the example of, and you made mention of it a second ago, Miguel, about Amazon. Do you really need to order 3 different orders from Amazon? Just, especially like if it's, I don't know, toothpaste and 3 other things, you can probably package them together so it does come together in one box, right? It's the same thing with running errands at home. You got 4 places to go. Why go out 4 days in a row? Make a little loop and try to be fuel efficient. Recycle everything you have. So start with yourself. Expand that out to your job and do what you can at your job, in your career, with the things that you're working on. And if each one of us takes that attitude of, I'm going to try to make a little bit of difference, well, collectively, it will make a difference. So yeah, you're never going to solve all the issues, and we can sit here and complain about what our federal government's not doing to support all this and stuff. Well, you know what? This too will change, but we can still make an impact here on a local basis. So I think the sooner you accept that and take it upon yourself to do something, the more impactful you actually can be throughout your career.
All right. I guess what I would go with is challenge and opportunity. Buried in all the problems that we're currently having and all the problems anyone has ever had is a wonderful opportunity for someone and possibly many people. And the best thing you can say about the condition of the planet as it is now, with lots of situations of degradation and over-resource use, is that this is a huge and wonderful opportunity for people to innovate. And you are out there, you can do it.
Yeah, for me, I mean, it seems, again, we practiced this before. No, I think it's a combination of the two. It's more about challenging to the status quo, meaning that what you know today is not going to be maybe tomorrow. And I speak again as a personal experience when I was in Mexico working in a very pristine, beautiful jungles in the southern of Mexico with Guatemala. You go to the Yucatan Peninsula. Chichen Itza was a dirt road in the 80s. Now it's a park. You go to Xelha in the Gulf, in the Caribbean. In Mexico, it used to be these pristine, beautiful pools. Now it's SeaWorld, right? It's a bunch of constructs, buildings and everything else. So I thought that pristine beauty is always lasts, right? So when I took my kids 10 years ago, I mean, that thing was gone. So I think challenging the status quo in relation to let's preserve to what we feel is beauty. And I think from that perspective, you have to be able to think about, well, maybe the beauty that I'm experiencing right now is not going to be there tomorrow. So that would think that is a little bit like abstract too, but just start thinking about what you already experiencing right now, because maybe it's not going to be tomorrow. So don't just sit on it, just trying to preserve it, trying to push it to make sure that it's going to be for the next generations. I have 2 grandchildren right now, and that's exactly my goal. For the next 20 or 30 years I'm still alive, that's basically what I want to be working, right? To make sure that they are going to be able to enjoy the things that I enjoyed too when I was still alive. So yeah. Get philosophical, and I haven't had my coffee yet, so.
It's the intersection of art and science and economics, right?
That's really, really motivating.
Yes, wonderful. Okay, my last question for you, and then it looks like we might have a few from the audience as well. But my last question is, what gives you hope about the next generation of professionals entering your field with a focus on sustainability and climate action?
I think what gives me hope is that there is an awareness in our world today. I know, Miguel, we haven't compared driver's licenses, but I expect we're about the same age. Yeah, pretty much. Although he's got hair, you notice that? Some guys. But,
Genetics is genetics.
yeah, okay, all right, pal. But no, in all seriousness, you know, when I started in this business, I couldn't probably even spell sustainability. It wasn't a thing. It wasn't something that was focused on. There was not an awareness of it. And even energy efficiency was like not a big deal. Started my career selling air conditioners, and you know, I think we had 3 models with 3 different SEER ratings on it, right? And to try to sell the highest efficiency, oh, that's too expensive, I'm not buying that. Because you know, it didn't have any impact. So that's what gives me hope, is that there is a huge awareness of it now in our world. And to all the points that we've been making, right, you can make a difference. There's so many areas to go with it. So I'm encouraged by that, and that feels really good. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, I just second all that. I'm totally encouraged whenever I talk to people who are much younger than me, because they seriously care about the common good and they seem to be motivated for the right reasons. And this is why, no matter what might happen politically, I don't think that this is a movement that could be stopped. I don't think there's anything that could be done to stop it. Hope I'm right about that.
I'm with you.
No, I mean, same thing. It's just keep moving forward what you feel is your most valuable, or more your part of your values. And the preservation of the environment and the aspects of sustainability are part of you, because again, we actually were kind of embedded later on in our game and be aware of sustainability. But for the younger populations, you guys are living the moment. And I think it's already embedded in you. It's just a matter of being more conscious about it and start pushing it. And obviously, you have a great opportunity here at Pima Community College in learning more about sustainability. And obviously, a little bit as we are on the same age bracket, just come and talk to us. And we can actually help you to say, maybe you are in the right path, or, you know, just do it. We will never say anything negative, because you have all that information available. I mean, I remember when we used to go to the library and make photocopies, and was only 2 books available, so you have to wait until the book is returned so you can make photocopies to make, you see what I mean? You guys now have a lot of information so available to you that you can actually, literally, you can rock sustainability.
Wonderful. Well, we have a few questions from the audience, and if anybody else would like to join in from the audience, you have the join codes up at the top there, and then you click on the little conversation box at the bottom, and you can chime in here. So we have a question for our train panelists. Referring to the project you mentioned, do you mean the IRA tax credit reduced the number of years the project would take to meet the target rate of return?
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant. We leveraged the 179D tax deduction in the tax code because it had some enhanced levels that once you got to greater than 25% efficiency reduction, it went from like $2.50 a square foot. It could go all the way to $5 a square foot. I think we got them like $2.69 a square foot. But so that's what actually, when you take that amount of money, $636,000 off of the calculation for the financials on the project, reduce the return on investment, simple payback, by 3 years. Yeah,
It's massive.
pretty significant.
All right, let's see what else. What about environmental accounting? Interpret that however you might.
What about that? I don't know, I'm not an accountant, so. No, I think that's great. I don't know if there is any specific, I mean, I think the things that I know about accounting is pretty much the same that has been for years, so I don't know if it's anything different right now, but I think if I understand the question is to see how the particular aspects related to the environment are going to be logged into a ledger. And then from there, how the return on investments is going to be? I don't know.
All right,
Maybe you know
so
a little
I'm
bit more
not a
about that.
finance person either, but I can say in my business, an emerging field is appraisals related to ecosystem services and valuation of, and actually, like, for example, in renewable energy, we're already attaching values to this. I've been doing so for a long time, but we're trying to attach values to other kinds of environmental interventions that we are making, because you can't assume that, for example, the value that it takes to create a green infrastructure kind of addition to a building project has zero value when it comes to something like additional infiltration of water into the ground and stormwater management. All those things have a value, but we're not used to attaching one to it. So that requires some accounting expertise. I don't know if that's what was meant by the question, though.
Again, it's another language that we have to learn now, environmental accounting.
The two things I'll add to that, and again, like my fellow panelists here, I'm not entirely certain about the question, but I'll add these two things. The first is that when you improve a building, there's another deduction under the tax called the QIP, Qualified Investment Project, Qualified Energy Investment Project. And that there's a calculation there that raises the value of a particular piece of real estate based upon the improvements that you make. So there is that aspect to it, and that is, again, part of that whole financial literacy thing we talked about before, that sooner you understand that and are able to speak that language with owners, that's the kind of stuff that goes into their calculus as to, oh, okay, I should invest in this project rather than do these other four things in the budget here. So that's number one. The other thing I'll mention is legislation called PACE, which is unfortunately not legislation we have here in Arizona, although it's in 37 other states in the United States, and it enables a building owner to be able to finance energy improvements on their tax bill, and it's transferable when they go to sell it. And it's, and the money comes at very low interest rates. So it's a really, that's a new tax part of the code just in the last few years. So maybe that's part of what goes into environmental accounting. We are pushing to try to get that to be legislated here in Arizona, but it might be a while. So
Sounds like we got some letters to write, folks.
yeah, lots of them.
All right, the next one is, in the companies you've worked in, has sustainability been a central goal from the highest levels of leadership or just kind of a positive side project? Have you noticed any trajectory of change over time?
Ooh, I have an answer. Yes, the answer is yes. There's been a huge change that over the 20 years that I have been doing, that I've been sustainability specific. Before that, I was just a regular non-sustainability architect. But over those years, my practice has changed substantially. And this is the best time ever to be a sustainability consultant, that there ever was. And I think it's going to continue to get better. And here are the reasons. So the sustainability commitments being made by corporations and governments have been a huge motivating factor for investments toward the sustainability side. And these are creating tons of opportunity for people in the building industry and all sorts of other professionals who have expertise in clean energy, in green infrastructure, in all sorts of fields that are related to buildings and other infrastructure kinds of improvements that companies make. It has been just absolutely a game changer in my industry, these commitments. So one of the interesting things that's happening with this administration is that corporations are not abandoning their commitments, but they have decided to stop talking about them as much. And I have pretty good visibility to a number of corporate commitments in my role, and everything I've seen is that they intend to continue on the track that they're on. And the reason is because these are pretty short timescales to decarbonize by 2040 when you're talking about the millions of buildings around the world to do that. The only way to make that happen is to be acting right now. And the people in leadership, for the most part, understand that if they stalled it, they would never hit the goals. And there is significant financial incentive, whether or not you've made a public-facing commitment, because your incentive is that the value of all your building projects, always speaking about building projects because that's what I know, that they can become stranded, obsolete. That's a word we use for assets that are they no longer maintain enough value that you would want to continue investing in them. You don't want to be stuck in that position. That could be the end of your company if real estate is a significant portion of your revenue. Oh, 100%. 100%. I see that.
Just
Yeah,
to
I
repeat
see-
the
I see-
question, it was, do you see the current trajectory as or the current state of things as a blip where the trajectory will stay the same? And
Yeah, okay, so my 100% is our trajectory will perhaps be slowed a little, but it will not be stopped. I can't see that in any universe because the fundamental factors, both economic and scientific, require that we continue on the path we're on.
sure.
Yeah. So I started with saying that Matt had mentioned how important the Inflation Reduction Act funding was to a project he was working on, and obviously much of that funding is going away. So how can you continue with your sustainable pursuits, the three of you, without support from state and federal government? Isn't that a necessary component if we're going to continue to achieve the goals that we would like to?
Well, as Julie said, this is not going away. People may change the names to protect the innocent, to fly under the radar from the government. But to your question, the Inflation Reduction Act was not necessary to make these projects happen. It was more of an accelerator. So all the other financial tools that we still have in place to financially justify a project, i.e. Operational savings, utility savings, capital improvement budgets to pull forward, deferred maintenance costs is what I meant to say, sorry. All those other things are still in play. The Inflation Reduction Act helped to accelerate and to improve the financials. Our viewpoint as a corporation right now is that legislation is exactly that. It is legislation. It was passed by Congress. So technically, an executive order cannot stop that from being implemented. It would take another act of Congress to unregulate or to unlegislate that, if you will. So the federal government's current position is, well, we're analyzing, we've put it all on hold. Doesn't mean that they can continue to delay it. So the way we're approaching projects today is we are showing the calculation for whatever those additional incentives are, except that in the past we would say to the customer, hey, we'll facilitate it and we know we're within a couple of grand of getting that for you. Now what we're saying is we got to do the project, we're going to put the application in, we're not sure if it's going to come through, but we'll sure advocate on your behalf to try to get it. Does that answer your question? Okay, sure.
And I would second that and say that energy costs continue to go up. Operational costs and resiliency concerns remain very important in my clients' eyes. Those arguments aren't going anywhere based on any regulations that happen to get changed by Congress. And I also would like to think it is not a fait accompli that the IRA is going to be demolished. I think you should continue to advocate, as was mentioned earlier during the day. I know my company is, and I'm sure Matt's company is too.
You bet.
One comment. So I'm not a building guy. I'm a product sustainability guy. 35 years in that realm. So to the question about whether things will continue, this is about who are your customers, who are your stockholders, who are your financial partners, and for data. What happened to Target when they said that they were going to divest from DEI? Revenue is down 21% in 90 days. What happened to Costco when they said they were going to support DEI? Revenue is up 12% in 90 days. So I just think you have to think that this is going to continue. And it's not going to continue because the government says so. It's going to continue because people, like the two young men who were up here at the very first in the morning, that's what's going to keep this going.
Good point, Phil.
Great point, Phil.
And I think right now the innovation, I think there is a lot of innovation and creativity there. And there is a lot of, regardless of age, people that is want to do something different, right? Because the status quo, as I mentioned, is being challenged. And I think regardless if there is going to be a government intervention, positive or negative, the business and the ideation and the motivation of people to do things different and new, I think is there. I mean, a couple of weeks ago was the 10 West, right? A lot of
I think we expired.
the battery died. I'm so positive that I suck all day. And I think that happens, right? I mean, 10 West is a prime example here that happened a couple of weeks ago because there is a lot of innovation, a lot of things that younger people mostly are into that particular process because ideas and business will never die. Our regulation, government regulation will never squash the creativity and the innovation. That's what I think ingenuity kicks in and start developing new ideas. And also for the current business environment, companies or businesses who are already established, then they're just going to stop their operations just because our regulation came or executive order came. Because it's all about money, fortunately or unfortunately. And as I always said, and it's something that I use a terminology, here in the US is the umbilical cord of capitalism. So I don't think the economic system is going to change in the next 4 years. We are in a bunch of hiccups and everything else, right? We look into your 401k, your pensions, you don't want to look at it again because it's down. But I think what people feel or believes that is going to come up. So that resilience has to be there because obviously I don't think that any type of the regulation or law that was established, the IRA that was established a few years ago, that is going to be stopping because businesses are, I mean, that's the economy of the US. That's the way I see it, right? We're the #1 consumer market in the world, so I don't think it's gonna go away.
Thank you all so much. So I'll give you a moment to de-seat yourself, if you will, and come up. I have a lovely plaque for each of you that says, thank you for your contribution and your inspiring action to advance sustainability in our community. Thank you so much, Matt, Julie, and Miguel.
Thank you very much.
The microphones are getting tired. This concludes our live stream portion for PCC TV, so thank you for joining us for Climate Community Day. For the rest of our participants, we're going to wrap up with an activity